Okay, you want to sit? Is that your spot? Okay, looks good. Okay. All right, after all that, that's where you're sitting. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, all right, all right. There you go. Okay. All right. Okay, now that we're all settled in, welcome back. Okay, so we just got settled here. I'm not sure if I'll leave it in the video, but there was a lot of commotion, a lot of chaos, digging and scratching on the couch. And that's now finally complete, so we can begin with our update. All right, so it looks like we can finally get underway here. This crazy pup has finished her digging and scratching of the couch as usual to get settled in, but no paw licking. Apparently not done with the paw licking, but hopefully we can proceed. So this is an update video that's the night before her first radiation treatment. We completed surgery. That was, I think, 7 weeks ago now. And the surgery was successful, as noted in the previous update video. That updated video was actually quite late. I meant to post that almost immediately after surgery, but you know, things just kind of got backed up and we got distracted with all sorts of things, the recovery, and you know how it is. Time just goes by so quickly. The surgery was successful, the margins were clean, but because this is a recurrent tumor, we were strongly advised to proceed with radiation to minimize the risk of another recurrence. We had originally planned to go through with a 12 times protocol, which would have been 3 times a week for 4 weeks. We went there, I guess that was 3 weeks ago, to have a CT scan, but it was a really bad day. There was a cat in the back that was just screaming. It was horrible. It sounded like a torture chamber. There was also a dog that was, you know, yelping, and it was just horrible in the back. We have no idea what's going on. It's sealed off, but the noise was carrying through. She was panting like crazy, and I started having some serious doubts about any kind of adjuvant therapy. I thought, you know what, why take the risk? She's doing fine. There's a good chance that this surgery was completely successful and there are no residual traces of cancer left behind. And so we dramatically walked out before the CT scan. That was supposed to be a planning CT. And we actually simply stated, you know what, we're changing our mind. We want her back. And it was a bit of a dramatic, well, okay, I'm not going to over dramatize it. It was probably unexpected, I'm sure, for the regular radiologist that's been our contact person at this facility. And so we went home and we thought, you know, we did something good. We had that kind of sense of relief because, of course, no anesthesia that day. That's always scary. But immediately when we got back home, it was clear that there was no feeling of resolution. It felt like we had failed her. At least I felt like there was just that cloud hanging over us that this will likely come back. I don't know what the statistics are. Honestly, I've tried to dig through that. On a first-time tumor, a liposarcoma like hers, and if it's excised with clean margins, they say that the risk of recurrence is somewhere around 10%, 13%, under 20%, maybe 15% at most, depending on which studies you look at. But we already did that. We did that last summer, and the odds were very much in our favor. And 10 months later, boom, there was a 15 millimeter tumor, which doesn't sound like it's a big thing, but on a small French Bulldog, that's a pretty big tumor. So as for a second tumor and the likelihood of recurrence, even though it's been excised with complete margins, I don't know. I've tried to look around to find out what the odds are, and we just simply can't really get an answer on that. It may be something like 50-50, which, hey, what are you doing? That's a little crazy there. Which are not very good odds, obviously. So that's why we're kind of set on doing this radiation treatment. But then because of the chaos that was going on, she was panting like crazy. It was a hot day, and I just felt that that was not the right thing. And I thought, you know what? No, we're going to stick to my philosophy personally and my own health and everything else. And that has not been a good philosophy for myself, at least, because I've dug myself into a pretty bad hole sometimes with the mindset that I don't deal with anything unless it's, you know, right there in front of me. So preemptive medications, things like that, no way. If I'm fine now, why would I risk, you know, some kind of surgery or some kind of medication that has side effects? If I'm okay now, if I can manage now, I'm just gonna hang in there, and I'll deal with that medical situation when it's actually necessary to deal with it. But obviously there's certain things that that philosophy may work well for, you know, for certain injuries, for certain illnesses that you can monitor and take a wait and see approach. But when it comes to cancer, obviously that is not a successful strategy. That is a losing strategy unless you are set on some kind of a, you know, I don't know, palliative route. That's just not a successful strategy. But in this case, it's a little bit more of a gray area, because obviously, as far as we can tell, there is no cancer at this moment. There's no tumor that was removed. And so this is exactly where it sits in that gray area, like I said, where my philosophy seems to make sense in a way, which is, if there's nothing there, why do something that's quite risky? You're talking about radiation treatment. There's a lot of potential for side effects. There's the risk of anesthesia when it comes to veterinary radiation. But on the other hand, as I said, it's cancer, and if you miss it, well, given the fact that she's now finished 2 surgeries, which means a lot of healthy tissue has been removed for those wide margins to achieve that cancer-free status after surgery. A third occurrence would be potentially devastating, because the tumor now may be directly on bone. It may be in a very risky area. It could be on a nerve. It could be anything. And we were told that there's, you know, a high risk that if it comes back, that it could lead to, or it may necessitate amputation or a much more invasive surgery, which is something that we have tried our very hardest to avoid. And we obviously don't want that outcome. And so, anyways, I'm going on. Forgive me for that. You know, immediately that night, and certainly by the next day, we're realizing this is probably not the right course of action, and we hesitated for a couple days, and then we started to regret the decision. So we contacted the clinic back a few days later to try to get back on track and, you know, see if we can get that CT scheduled. And thankfully, it went pretty quickly. The CT was, I think, just a week and a few days extra. I think it was maybe 9 days after it was originally scheduled. It takes time. Obviously, you can't just get slipped in on the same day. So that was a little bit of a delay. But as it turns out, the first radiation treatment will be tomorrow, which is ends up being only 1 week later than what it would have been. I think the way that the CTs and the radiation treatments lined up, it ended up being that we don't lose that much time, which is a relief. It's 1 week delay. And given the course of radiation that we're going to pursue, which I'll talk about in just a moment, giving that scar tissue some additional time to heal, at least does minimize the risk of some of those late effects that can happen with radiation. The necrotic tissue, the scar tissue, the stiffness, those kind of things. If you have healthy tissue before the radiation begins, you of course reduce the risk of those catastrophic outcomes where you could have, for example, my biggest fear for this treatment is a wound that won't heal, or some severe ulceration or bone necrosis. Of course, the scar tissue on the skin won't really have an impact on bone necrosis, but the non-healing wound would be, of course, a devastating outcome. Now, as far as to what kind of radiation we're pursuing, whoa, you okay? Whoa, okay, easy. I thought we were done with that. I thought we were done with the scratching and digging. Okay. Hey, what's going on? Okay. Can we settle down, please? Okay, there you go. Okay. Sit. Go ahead and sit. Can you take a seat? Can you take a seat? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So as far as the radiation treatment that we've chosen, we went back and forth, and it turns out that it was probably not necessary to do that much debate, because the last time we went for her planning CT, which was last week, it was clear. The way that she was panting, the stress and anxiety that she was under was excessive, and the idea of putting her through every other day for 4 weeks was unfortunately not realistic. It would have been a much better treatment option. From the statistics that we look at, maybe the likelihood of success is not that different, but it does, at least the standard studies seem to indicate that that course of action would have been a little bit more likely to succeed than the one that we were ultimately forced to settle on, which is once a week for 4 weeks. And in case you're wondering, okay, well, why does that seem more risky once a week? Well, the approach is basically either you do a frequent course of action where you do small doses of radiation every other day, more frequently, or if you do it less frequent, then you go with big doses. So imagine you either take a sledgehammer a few times, or you take a little fine chisel with lots of little repeatedly. And that's why the risk of late effects are greater with the course of action that we've chosen, which is once a week, high doses. And I think the dosage is about, let's see, is it maybe, I think it's like 2.5 times higher. It almost evens out. So basically you're getting that week's dose in one shot instead of spacing it out over 3 days. And it's basically about the same. I think it's about maybe the once a week is about 2.5 times as much radiation in one shot as the 3 times a week version that we had hoped to proceed. And as I said, the way that she was panting, it was just excessive. And for once, we do have a radiologist or a veterinarian that is a little bit more concerned with the effects of anesthesia. I've always been very frightened of anesthesia. I have some very sad veterinary experiences from long ago, and I know that that's a bit outdated, that veterinary medicine has changed dramatically from the times when I was, in high school and college, when you could experience those kind of tragedies more frequently, where veterinary anesthesia seemed to be a really high-risk ordeal. I know that times have changed and that they've improved, but at the same time, she's a high-risk breed. These flat-faced doggies, unfortunately, are at higher risk of anesthetic complications, particularly their throat shape and their elongated palate makes it difficult for them to breathe. They're more prone to incidents after anesthesia when the tube is taken out and they try to breathe on their own. They can get edema in the throat, and that throat will swell and the airway gets blocked off, and you can have a tragic outcome. So even if the anesthesia itself is not the risk to French Bulldogs, the anesthetic procedure is. And the radiologist that we were consulting agreed with this risk, and he agreed with my concern. And I didn't even raise it myself. I spoke privately to my wife about this, that I seriously questioned whether we could do this to her 3 times a week for 4 weeks in a row. And the problem, which relates to her situation, being a flat-faced French Bulldog, is that she has to be intubated every time. They have to put a tube in her throat every time to perform the anesthesia because of that elongated palate. It would be a risk to use, for example, a mask. Now, some dogs, because it's a very short anesthetic procedure, may be candidates for a simple gas mask where they can just be put unconscious for just a few minutes. It doesn't take that much for this radiation procedure. She's not a candidate for that. And as you can imagine, if you're intubated, anybody, a dog, human, anything, if you're getting a tube put into your throat every other day for a month, that's going to cause some irritation. And doing that 3 times a week would have just been too much. And as I said, seeing her, the way that she was panting, I think that in itself was creating a tremendous amount of irritation. We looked into medications that could calm her down and potentially allow her to arrive at the clinic in a calm state of mind without the heavy panting and the snorting that irritates her throat. But even then, the intubation itself would be quite harsh. And I do have some concerns about adding medication first. I know that that seems to be a pretty commonsensical approach, and I do find it when I search it online, it does seem to be frequently referenced, but this clinic doesn't do it ordinarily. And so my philosophy when it comes to any kind of medical procedure or anything serious basically is don't rock the boat. Don't do something that they're not accustomed to. That's how mistakes happen. That's how miscalculations occur. That she comes in already pre-sedated. They make a miscalculation. I'm already scared under normal conditions that they're going to miscalculate the amount of gas anesthetic to use, or the amount of propofol that they're going to use to induce her unconscious state. So I don't want to introduce any more complications, especially if it's something that they're not used to. And the radiologist, the point of contact for her, made it clear that that's not something they usually do. They are willing to do it, So anytime someone tells you, well, we're willing to do it, you know what, I think we're just going to stick to the plan. And if it's just once a week, we know that she can manage. There'll be some throat irritation, but that will certainly go away within a few days, and she'll be fine for the next procedure. So we're going to be doing this for 4 weeks. Tomorrow is the first one, and as is tradition at this point, and I can honestly say it is tradition because this is 2 years running. We've had, in the last 2 years now, we've had what? 3 CT scans, 2 surgeries, and we're about to have 4 radiation sessions, all of these requiring anesthesia. So before every anesthetic procedure, we've filmed a video up here. I've updated what's going on, what's going to happen, and that's that. I'm going to try to post this for a change. I did film this video last week, or filmed a video like this last week before the CT scan, the planning CT scan. I filmed it 2.5 weeks before that for the other CT that we were supposed to get. We ended up not getting. Neither of those videos made it online. I just haven't gotten around to it, so I'll actually try to post this one and keep everybody up to date. One more update, and that relates to our plans for the French Bulldogs and Philosophy podcast. I have not abandoned that. It's not some project that I've just set off to the side. It is, to a certain extent, delayed because of all the things that are going on. I wanted to make much better progress. I actually wanted to at least have 1 or 2 episodes recorded by now between the surgery and the beginning of radiation treatment. But we've had a lot of things going on. This has been a little bit more complicated than expected. Our other French Bulldog, the big guy, who is not in the video today because he's having a little bit of a back crisis. He has a condition called hemovertebrae, which is, I'm not going to get into it. Hopefully we don't have to make a video series on that, and that can continue to be managed with just occasional medication when he gets some flares. But that is a potentially very serious condition that could require a very complicated surgery that honestly I'm not sure that I would be comfortable trying to pursue, because it looks very complicated. So I'm always nervous when that happens. He seems to have these episodes every few months. We don't really know why. We're very cautious. No jumping on furniture, no excessive activity. We have non-slip floor surfaces pretty much throughout the house for her hips, for his back. I'm guessing just sometimes he's in the bed, he does some kind of strange twisting when he wakes up, and some stretches, and he may have just triggered it like that. So he's not in the video today, but that has been another distraction. But the plan is still moving forward. The only thing that's changed is that I think my traditional instincts are resurfacing. This was supposed to be a casual, conversational video series about philosophy, but it's a topic that I take so seriously that as I started to prepare the script and the kind of notes for this, I just kept digging deeper and deeper, and it's becoming awfully lecture-ish. It's becoming very lecture-like rather than podcast-like. So I'm not sure if I'm going to just go with that and just treat that as my more natural approach, and maybe the pups, our 2 French Bulldogs, will just be co-hosts, or my assistants in the video, or if I'm going to try to make some revisions and get back into a more casual podcast style approach. Obviously I'm going to have to make some revisions. I think I've left in a lot of the technical jargon that is just not going to be very appealing for a general audience. So I would like to try to make it very relatable and interesting, and so I'm going to have to make some revisions to that. But it is moving along nicely. I've been going through a lot of the relevant books. The only other thing that's changed as well is that what I originally thought would be the maybe 1 or at most 2 episodes. I wanted to do French philosophy because it's French Bulldogs and philosophy, so I thought as a way to kick off the channel, I would stick to maybe, as I said, the first or 2 episodes would be on French philosophy, perhaps a couple different periods or a couple different themes, and we move on to many different things. But the French philosophy theme ended up really drawing me in quite a bit, and it's turned into quite a mega project that I at this point, I imagine there could be the first, I don't know, several episodes. This could end up being the content of a book at this stage. I think there's enough content there for multiple different chapters. So I've got my work cut out for me to try to filter this down and make it into something that will be suitable for an interesting video series. The content is probably not the most salient. It's about a fairly dark aspect of French philosophy, basically death and the meaning of life. And I know that's a bit morbid because that was something that we kicked off in light of our pup's upcoming surgery. And I gotta be honest, it forced me to think about the tragic quality of life and the reality that we all know deep down, but we try to navigate on a day-to-day basis without thinking too much about, and that is, of course, the reality that life ends, whether it's about our own at some point in the distant future or the loved ones around us. And of course, with our furry companions, that is, that is a very painful reality, that basically the moment that we get them, it's like a newborn creature, well, a few months old, but this creature that's so full of life, but they come to us sadly with a terminal illness. The moment that they come to us, we don't think of it because they're full of life and they have their whole future ahead of us. But if we were to think about it rationally, when they come to us, even as puppies only a few months old, they come to us with a terminal illness. It's we don't think of it that way because that's their natural lifespan, but if we think of it in human terms, and when you come to attach yourself to these guys, when they become a full-fledged member of your family, they are a full-fledged member, at least for us. These guys are full-fledged members of our families. We love them dearly, and that is the sad reality, is that these members of our family have a terminal illness. It's not the devastating news of being told you only have a few months, but it's this new member of your family that you bring in, and there's a doctor somewhere out there that doesn't say it to you directly, but it's basically that. Your little pup that's come to you has a terminal illness, has about 10 to 15 years only. That's it, So when you think of those questions, when people have some terrible illness or, some kind of situation like that, they always say, how long do I have, doc? Right? And sadly, when you're talking about, terrible illnesses, sometimes they tell you, the 5-year survival rate is 50% or something like that. We do measure these kind of illnesses in those ranges: 5-year, 10-year survival rate, 20-year survival rate, and depending on what stage you are in your life, that can be a very tragic news. That would be tragic news to get. But in this case here, at the very beginning of their life, we're told this tragic news. No, I know no one tells us that, but that is the reality. It's basically like that we are forced to accept the fact that they have a terminal illness. They have a 10-year survival rate of only 75-80%, and 15-year survival rate drops to almost zero. A 15-year survival rate is sadly pretty unattainable, certainly for French Bulldogs. My wife tells me that there's a few cases. I'm obliged to say this. She claims that she read about a French Bulldog in Japan that reached 17. That would be amazing, of course. But even then, that's a short life. And so I'm going way off topic here. That drew me into the theme of death and the meaning of life. And when you're about to lose someone very significant to you, obviously your mind shifts to those kind of questions. And philosophy is a great source of, I won't say comfort. It's a great source of, I don't know what source it is. It's certainly not comforting, and it's certainly not even enlightening per se, but I'd say it's a good way to process it. Certainly, it's a good way to confront it when you read some of the views by past philosophers. And certainly, as I was mentioning, in French philosophy, there is a strong, dark element of, well, I don't want to say dark element, but there's this strong element of dealing with the reality that life is short. And certainly some of the more recent French philosophy, and not restricted to French philosophy, of course, is the prospect that there is nothing after this. And how do we make sense of life knowing that it just ends? according to some. Certainly, if you do not have a religious worldview and you believe that this is it in life, then it raises a very important question. What's the point of it all if it just ends into nothingness? And what's the point of anything? The people that you care about, the lives that you cherish will vanish and you will never see them again. Your own life will vanish at some point, and it will all be for nothing potentially if you do not have a religious worldview. And so that's something that unfortunately I've always dealt with as a philosopher myself, as a professor of philosophy, when I'm not doing my now full-time work of researching veterinary oncology. And in our other French Bulldog's case, I'm forced to also do some veterinary neurology for his spinal and central nervous system issues. And I'm not kidding how much research I'm doing for these things. It really does take away from my own work. And so this philosophical exercise in the past couple months has been refreshing in the sense that I'm finally doing something that gets back to my own field. But it has I don't know if it's helped me process what's happening, because on the one hand, I'm still fighting. We're still fighting. We're still hoping. And I don't want to say hoping, actually. We're still fighting, and we're still planning for a successful outcome. There, I'll say that. I don't like hoping. That sounds too passive, and frankly, sounds hopeless. There's a lot of things I hope for in life, but this is not something I'm hoping for. I'm planning for, and I'm preparing for, and I'm doing everything I possibly can to create a successful outcome. So that's what we're doing. And anyways, so the long story short, the planning for our podcast or video lecture series, whatever it's going to be, is underway. It's coming along nicely. The content is there, and I'm not sure how popular it's going to be. It's probably something that people don't want to discuss, don't want to think about, and it's, as I said, not particularly helpful or comforting. It's not something where I can say, you know what, it's going to help you it's going to help you process these unfortunate things that we have to wrestle with in life. No, maybe not. I think it sheds some understanding, and hopefully the goal is to ultimately help people make sense of it on their own, to try to find some way to make peace with that reality, and most importantly, find a way to live the present and the time that we do have, as well as you can possibly live it in light of that information. So that's what we're going to be working on, and hopefully we'll have some fun filming and recording this. But before we can get to the recording stage, at this point, unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for her to heal. I'm not sure what to expect. I'm very frightened by the prospect of this once-a-week radiation treatment. I get a lot of conflicting information about that as well, whether the side effects are likely or it's a relatively rare case that you have these terrible outcomes. So it is very frightening, because unlike the surgery that we did, unlike the last two surgeries that we've done, this one is something that we really can't fix once it's done. So surgical mistakes, of course, can be tragic. They can be devastating, but complications generally can be handled with antibiotics, painkillers. There can be a surgical revision. There's a much more open-ended aspect to surgery. Radiation, on the other hand, it's a bit like, I'm not sure, just launching a rocket and having no control over the course. You program it ahead of time, and you launch it, and it's going to hopefully go off in orbit or do whatever it's going to do and come back. I know that modern rockets and satellites, they do have communication with Earth, and you can make some changes. But imagine an older style rocket that everything is pre-programmed, and you launch it, and whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. And that's unfortunately the case with radiation. There's not much that we can do. So if there's going to be those terrible side effects, if you're going to have necrotic tissue on those kind of wounds that don't heal, there may not be much that can be done, and that part really frightens me. So I don't know what else to say. I think this update is a relatively dark one. I'm realizing that now from the tone of the project that we're going to be doing about French Bulldogs and French philosophy. to my dark assessment about the risks of radiation treatment. I know that it's a bit of a dark update, but as I said, these updates are supposed to be informative for anybody that's dealing with these issues. That's the reality of it. When you have a cancer that reoccurs like this, you have to face the prospect that you need a much more aggressive treatment to prevent a third reoccurrence. And we do feel pressured to pursue this course of treatment simply because, as I said, I fear that a third surgery would be, well, I don't think we need to get into a third surgery would be extreme. And we've already pretty much ruled out amputation, which is what we're told is a very real possibility, that if it comes back, there'd be no way to remove the tumors the way the first two were removed while preserving the leg, preserving the shoulder bone. So we're forced to take a risk now and go all in. My reasoning on this ultimately was simply that if there's another cancer, we basically have only one more treatment, one way or another, and both of them are likely to be risky, possibly extreme. So you know what? We should do the radiation now in the best of circumstances when she's doing well, she's fully healed, and we have a chance at a nearly complete cure. The only thing that I don't like as well is not only that the radiation is something that we can't fix if problems occur, but it's also the guarantees that we do have. We have to always protect her skin after this because it's delicate and vulnerable. For example, she won't be able to ever be in the sun again. At least that part would have to be monitored at all times. I think we have to go out with a sun umbrella with a high UV protection grade. And I would probably say we have to be out there and hold something that's actually completely opaque over that area so that she doesn't get any sunburn, no sunshine at all on that spot for the rest of her life after radiation. This is a very harsh dose. We'll have to be very careful about any kind of wounds, scratches, insect bites, anything like that has a high risk of infection. And because it's a radiated site, there's a real risk that it won't be able to heal properly. So we're going to have to be very cautious. So basically, we're going to have we're going to have a disability that we'll have to deal with. That part is essentially guaranteed, and I think that's also a very unsettling part. Unlike the surgeries, which were, as I said, you could fix mistakes that happen along the way, but also they had the prospect of a complete cure. You know, if you recover from surgery, you can go back to normal. You just give it time to heal properly and everything's okay. In this case with radiation, we know that there's basically a cap. There's a ceiling on how well it can possibly go. And we can expect a reasonably good outcome because we're using a very advanced radiation device that they're going to be using. The linear accelerator that they're using is very sophisticated. It's a helical style radiation delivery system. So I think that means that it rotates around her and it's going to deliver radiation doses from multiple different angles. And I guess in times past it used to come in just, you know, kind of almost one sci-fi style, just one area and just absolutely blasting that whole area. But because now it's rotating around her, it can be much more precise, and it's not going to flood one area of healthy tissue with these massive doses. So it's going to impact on the targeted areas from multiple different angles, and presumably that's going to minimize the risk of severe damage to healthy tissue, and hopefully that's going to eliminate the risk of things like those ulcers that don't heal or those catastrophic outcomes. So we're going to wrap up here. Again, we're going to stop the video here. We're going to go tomorrow. We're going to do the anesthesia procedure. We're going to do radiation. It should not be too long. The only thing that's positive to end the video on a good note is that the weather changed dramatically in the last few days, amazingly. And I will say that I noticed this about a week ago when I was out on a walk with the whole family. My wife, both of our pups here were out, and I noticed it and I said, there's kind of I can always tell usually it's the end of August, you know, the later part of August, that there's a kind of evening breeze that it just feels like the motion of the air it just feels different. You can just tell that air masses coming in have shifted a little bit, and that brutal breaking heat, that brutal heat of summer was starting to break. And this time it happened incredibly early. This was the very beginning of August, and in the last couple nights, I can't believe it, we're able to sleep with no air conditioning on. I actually have normal blankets on overnight, and I woke up very comfortably the last few days. That being said, unfortunately tomorrow the temperature kicks back up a little bit, but at least it's not that horrible heat that it was that we had last time when we went for her CT scan, or the one certainly before that when we aborted the CT scan. So we have that bit of good news to end the video. What do you think? Yeah, so we're going tomorrow in the car. We're going to have cooler temperature, so hopefully you won't be panting quite as horribly. Or no? Can you try to keep a little bit calm? We'll see, right? We'll see. So anyway, so that's a good sign, at least, that we have a smooth car ride ahead of us tomorrow. Who am I kidding? She's gonna pant like crazy. She's of course gonna be a little bit stressed out. But I've been trying to desensitize her, as I noted in the previous video. I'm not sure actually if I uploaded this video, which video I pointed this out. But we've been trying to desensitize her by, I know it's mean, but we fake her out. We basically put her in the pet carrier, carry her out, start the car, and get all excited, and then just come right back in. And for a while, we're doing it twice a day, actually. And I think it's worked a little bit, because now, the last 2 times when we went, she didn't start panting excessively until we actually started driving. And that's actually very helpful, because that knocks off maybe about 15 minutes of that heavy, intense panting and snorting, I should say. She used to immediately, she could just tell when I come downstairs. She should be working for the police as some kind of lie detector dog, because she can just tell body language, or I don't know, some kind of energy. She can just immediately tell when I come downstairs, and she's already alert, getting ready to go. If I grab my hat or the keys, she begins panting and going frantic. Now she doesn't until she's actually in the car, until we actually maybe start driving. Then she realizes, oh, this is real. So the time that we usually take is about 15 minutes. When I go out, turn on the car, turn on the air conditioning, start warming, to start cooling off the car. She used to be just panting and going crazy during that time. Now that part's been eliminated. She does, she looks, she's staring, and she's trying to figure out, wait, what's going on? Is this real? Are we actually going? And while she's doing that, she's not panting. She's not freaking out. So a couple of bits of good news that we can end the video. The weather's cooled off a bit. She's been tricked or fooled into calming down before we leave, right? Right? Okay, so let's end on a good note. So that's it. We're going to wrap up the update here. I will post another update. We'll be doing this again next week. I think it's, as I said, tradition at this point. We're going to do one of these videos before every anesthesia procedure. So we're going to have 3 more of those, and hopefully we'll have a very good, I'm not supposed to say hopefully, but you know what I mean. We are expecting to post some good news in about 6 weeks. I think that the treatments will be done in after the 4th one, and it will be a couple weeks after that that we might see some initial redness, some irritation, and then within a few weeks that should calm down. So I'm expecting that maybe in, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks from now, from this video, we'll be posting a very positive update that she's recovering fully and getting back to normal. So that's it. Say goodbye. Say goodbye. Or not goodbye. Say see you later, okay? See you next week. See you next week. What do you think? Look up there. Look up there. See you next week. Okay. See you next week. Okay, that's doggy speak for see you next week. Take care, everyone.